Hello and welcome along to this week's Liverpool.com podcast. I'm Matt. Addison and Michael Plant is alongside me. It's obviously been a tough few days for all involved at Liverpool in whatever capacity you are involved with the Reds in, whether that's us as reporters, as fans, or anybody else in and around the club. The news that Diogo Jota and his brother Andre Silva both passed away last week has been very difficult to process, very difficult to talk about and very difficult to write about for us in the last few days. But we felt that it was important to put together a tribute show to Diogo Jota in particular from a Liverpool perspective. Of course, the news broke almost a week ago as we record this podcast. It still doesn't quite feel real. It still hasn't quite sunk in. And of course, it's not going to feel normal for some time yet. Liverpool's players, though, have started to come back for pre-season. The Reds are going to be back in action at the weekend against Preston North End. And we wanted to pay our tributes to Diogo Jota here. I went to Anfield last week shortly after the news had broken and people had started to pay their tributes. You can read that piece on Liverpool.com. Personally, I felt like that was the right thing for me to go down and pay my respects. A steady stream of people had been going down there all day at that point. There'd been a lot of tributes, shirts, scarves, banners, messages, all of that kind of thing. A real sense of shock at Anfield, but it was important, I think, for me to go down there, just for me personally, above all else, to go and help with that process. Michael, I know you were there at Anfield yesterday as well. Plenty of people have been down there between, yourself and me being down there as well. And I'm sure, you would share the same sentiments that I've echoed there of, it's been a tough week, hasn't it? It's been nice in some ways to see the tributes that have been made to Diogo Jota, but that doesn't make it any easier for anybody to go through this process.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, you summed that up very well, really. And I suppose at the very start of this programme, and I'm sure you'd echo this thought, that our thoughts just go out to the family of Diogo Jota and Andre Silva, because it is just such a heartbreaking and devastating story that we're still all just trying to wrap our heads around, really. We just can't believe it, in all honesty. And, as you mentioned, I went down to Anfield yesterday, which is Tuesday, and I was absolutely blown away by the tribute. I actually didn't bring anything. I signed the book and I almost was, as I was there, I was thinking, I wish I'd have brought something. I almost couldn't believe it didn't. And I would advise anyone, if you do go down, to bring something. You'll want to leave something behind almost. You see the pictures and even you see the videos, but when you're actually there and you see just how many tributes are, it is row and after row after row of tribute. I think if you start at the top and walk to the bottom, it would take 5 minutes to walk just the entire length of it. That's before you think about all the various rows and the different tributes that are there, be it, pictures or football shirts or signed photos. I saw, a signed photo of Diogo Jota there yesterday that someone had, given up essentially to pay tribute to him. And look, it's just such a tragic, difficult situation. And it's I think as football writers, we maybe get very wrapped up in it. You and I both spent quite a few days covering the story, the immediate shock, and you're completely taken back by it. And then to see the grief of the family, the parents, burying two children in their 20s, it's just unimaginable. And the fact that Diogo Jota himself, as a parent of three children, I think it was only 11 days prior, and got married. It is totally unimaginable, really. And I just felt it was important, as you said, to go down yesterday to Anfield just to see the tributes and to do this show today, to pay tribute to someone who I didn't know personally, but it has really affected me, and I've been struggled to think of anything else really for the last week or so, and it's just important, I suppose, that we pay tribute to him. A fantastic footballer, but by all accounts, also a fantastic human being as well. And I'm sure you'd echo those thoughts, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I only ever saw Diogo Jota in passing. I don't think I have ever had a proper conversation or anything with him, but I think it is a testament to the kind of person that he was, that people who did know him have spoken so eloquently in various ways about what he was like as a person as well as a footballer. By all accounts, very normal and very humble. And I think very much the reason it's hit home as hard as it has, really, and it's obviously a unique situation. There's nothing to compare it to in terms of the process and the grief that me as an individual has felt, and obviously the collective as well. But I think it is just the fact that he was almost as close to a normal person, as close to a life that I have as you can have as a footballer. And obviously there's lots of different reasons why it is a different life as a footballer compared to, somebody in normal society, if that's how you want to put it. But Diogo Jota, by all accounts, was very much happy to be just normal. That's the word that I keep coming back to, really. It does feel very much to me like he loved football. You could tell from the way that he played for Liverpool that he loved playing for Liverpool. I've heard it said a number of times in the last few days that he kind of played for Liverpool in the way that anyone who's stood on the carp or wherever you sat in the stadium, if they had the talent that Diogo Jota had, they'd play for Liverpool in exactly the same way. That sort of work ethic, the quality that he's got, obviously you don't want to downplay in any way, shape or form, but I think relentless has been a word that's been used a lot of times. Clearly very dedicated to his craft, and the way that he played football was a real joy to watch. Obviously, there were injuries and there were periods of frustration in his Liverpool career, but the goal record that he had, the fact that his goals were so important for Liverpool at so many different moments. It's really, really hard to come to terms with that, and it will obviously be tough for those who knew him best, his family, as you say. Our thoughts will continue to be with them. I have to be honest, I don't think a 10-minute period has gone by since the news broke where I haven't thought about Diogo Jota, his brother, and their family, by extension. Not just because we're covering it, but just, generally speaking, I think it's hit a lot of people very hard in those different ways. And we've seen that from the tributes that have poured in as well. There's been, so many of those tributes that have come in have been, absolutely amazing. The Andy Robertson one is probably the one that stands out the most to me. I'm sure people will have read and known how close they were. Quivin Kelleher as well, so many others. I mean, the tributes from all over the world have been, difficult to read at times, but I think it's been important to sort of go through that process as well. It's been amazing, hasn't it, to see all of those come into.
Yeah, and I think one of the tributes that actually really jumped out to me was Nat Phillips, who took 3 or 4 days before he could even bring himself to write anything. And obviously Nat Phillips, he's not a player who's played a huge amount for Liverpool over the last couple of years, but he's been around the club for a long time and would have got to know Diogo Jota very well. And he just, he struggled to even just bring himself to write something on social media. It was how devastated he was. I thought Conor Bradley's was really nice, where he spoke about how he welcomed him into the first team. I think he spoke about playing FIFA with him as well. And yeah, and we've got a real sense of, I think that we see footballers are obviously so public, but I think we've got to see a little bit almost behind the curtain, a little bit of his life, really, Diogo Jota, in the last couple of days, and the sort of person that he was away from the camera as well. And he wasn't someone who particularly wanted to hog the limelight anyway, but all the accounts are just that he was just a really down-to-earth, normal guy, as you said. And I think that it's just so difficult to keep coming back to that. This thought that this time last week he was here and now he isn't, and somehow football fans have got to start thinking about going back to normal life, to thinking about Liverpool as a football club without Diogo Jota, and obviously even the players being back in training is I suppose the next step, really, and it's very sadly, in a week's time, for instance, the news will have moved on slightly. We will be speaking about other things other than Diogo Jota, but it certainly won't be forgotten about, and we will continue to speak about him, write about him and talk about him, I think, throughout certainly the next year and the next season, but always going forward. I think he's going to be written into the history of Liverpool now, given the tragedy of this passing. And listen, Liverpool are a club that have had to deal with so many tragedies and so many difficult periods, and have always come through it as a better club, as a more united club and a more united city. And look, I'm not a Scouser, but I'm married to a Scouser. I live in Liverpool. I get a very good sense of what Scousers are and what these sorts of things mean to them. And I think that it's just, as I keep going back to, such a tragedy. And to pick up one point that you said there, Matt, as well, that I actually had no idea just quite how good his goal ratio was for Liverpool. It's outstanding, actually. It's right up there with some of the greatest players in the Premier League era for Liverpool. So it's just such a difficult thing, as I say, to conceive, to get your head around it. And I think that while we do, I like you, I didn't know Jota. I think I was in a room with him once, but you feel like these Premier League footballers, you always feel like you know them. You become, they become such an important part of your life. Whether it's Jota, whether it's other players, and like you've covered Liverpool for longer than me, but even just writing and covering Premier League footballers, they come to take up such a big place in your life. And even, as fans, it's the same as well. They just get absolutely consumed by these players and the impact that they have in their lives. And for a lot of people, it feels like they have lost a very significant person in their lives, even though they might not have actually known Diogo Jota. So, and I think it's right that people will be allowed to grieve in their own time. And I said that, the news cycle will sadly move on, but I think people have got the right to consume news as they want, to take it in as they want, whether they are ready to read non-Diogo Jota news. That's up to them, really, and that will be something that everyone will come to in their own time and their own speed, I suppose. But yeah, it's just such a difficult thing still to get your head around. But I was going to ask you, Matt, are there any kind of highlights over the years that from watching Diogo Jota as closely as you have that stick out from his time at Liverpool?
Yeah, there's a lot to choose from. He is a player that has given Liverpool fans a lot of joy over the years. And to be fair, his other clubs as well, I've noticed a lot of tributes, and there's been a lot of emotion from Wolves and from Porto and, the other clubs that he played for as well, which I think is a testament, really. There's not too many players that leave a club like Wolves and they wish them all the best and really, even at the time, there was a kind of sense of, we really want one of our own to go on and do well, which I think in itself, says a lot about the kind of personality and sort of person that Diogo Jota was for them as well as for Liverpool. But yeah, since moving to Liverpool 5 years ago, there's probably a few obvious ones that you can pick out. But I think the one that I keep coming back to is actually his last goal for Liverpool against Everton in the Merseyside derby, just for two reasons, really. Obviously, one, in terms of the importance of it, which is a theme of a lot of Diogo Jota's goals. He didn't score the fifth in a 5-0 win very often. It tended to be a decisive, game-changing contribution. And obviously, Liverpool at the time were still going for the Premier League title at that point. A Merseyside derby victory is always going to be an important one. And that was certainly at the time what felt like a big moment in Liverpool's season. But it was also the way that goal came about. It was a goal I've seen Diogo Jota score at least 10 times during his Liverpool career, 65 goals, and at least 10 of those were basically that, where he kind of engineers a bit of space for himself. It's instinctive, it's clever. The goalkeeper, for some reason, dives the wrong way. I'm not quite sure, how that manages to happen with so many of the goals that Diogo Jota scored. But I think it was that sort of clever clinicalness whenever the ball fell to somebody in the box. I think above all else in the Liverpool team, you'd want it to have been Diogo Jota, because he was instinctive in some ways, but I think that almost doesn't give credit to just how much he studied and how much he was really intelligent as a footballer. He knew where the ball was likely to drop. He knew where the defenders were likely to be, and he tended to be a couple of steps ahead of them. There's countless goals if you go back and see goals against Arsenal, goals. I think there was one against Leicester, which was very, very similar, possibly in the Carabao Cup a couple of seasons ago. Lots of goals really that sort of looked a bit like that, and I think it was fitting in some ways that that was his last goal for Liverpool. It was a goal that was very much typical Diogo Jota. Really, it was clinical and very, very clever. It's hard to pick out other moments beyond that one. There's far too many to go through. the other video that I've seen a lot this week is the one of him singing his own song in front of the Kop, which just, you're emotional when you watch it, but it puts a smile on your face as well, that he knew every word of that song he was joining in, and there was clearly a bond between him and Liverpool fans, as there are with lots of other players as well. But I think if there's any kind of small crumb of kind of hope that you can take from what is a really tragic situation, it is the fact that you'd like to think that him and one day his family will be able to reflect on it as well. The outpouring of emotion, when he was still with us, the bond that was there between him and those in the stands. But even after his passing now, to see the scenes, as we've mentioned, at Anfield, the sort of tributes that have been paid on social media, the people who have been impacted by this, I'm sure that isn't the first thing that the family will prioritise in their grieving process. But I'd like to think at some point, even if it's several years from now, they can take some sort of hope or positivity from the fact that he was clearly so loved by everyone at Liverpool. I think that, above all else, has really come to the fore in the way that people have responded to this. As I mentioned before, there's no comparison, there's no similar situation that you can compare this to, and it's clearly tragic and heartbreaking. But I'd like to think that the reaction to what has happened has really shown just how much Diogo Jota meant to Liverpool fans.
And his kids will see that in years to come as well, which is really important. And his wife will hopefully be able to take some comfort, as you say, from that. It's just difficult, we just can't imagine how they're feeling and the emotions that they're going through. And obviously, there were some kind of video clips from the funeral that you got some small, obviously, insight into just how grief-stricken she is and how difficult the situation this is. But yeah, and it's difficult to find the words, really, and I think so many people have spoken about it so eloquently over the last week or so, and have summed up so well how much Diogo Jota meant to Liverpool fans, but as you rightly said as well, Wolves fans in Portugal, and what struck me being down at Anfield yesterday is the sheer number of tops of other clubs there. The people, this is the football community is in grief over this as well, and every shirt you can imagine, Real Madrid to Stockport County, I think it was, I saw yesterday, a real huge mix. And when I was down yesterday, there was a guy in a Wolves top, and I overheard him kind of turn to someone and said, I've driven up from the Midlands this morning and I just had to come and see it. And I think that sums it up, really, and that's why the kind of memorial outside Anfield is so special. I think that it's just unbelievable how many people have shown up there to leave mementos and kind of keepsakes and tributes to Diogo and his brother Andre. So yeah, and then in terms of as a player, as you mentioned, that goal that you described against Everton, that is exactly the sort of typical Diogo Jota goal, I think, of almost wriggling through, almost riding and kind of shimmying his way through to find a half yard. And look, when he first came to Liverpool, I think everyone thought he was going to be predominantly a winger, and he tended to play more centrally, didn't he, really? And even in that last season, Arne Slot played him as a number 10 on a few occasions, and he was an incredibly intelligent, insightful footballer who, more than anything, just gave 100% to the team every time he went out. He wasn't a player who had 100 touches in a game. He only really kind of tended to come alive in the attacking third, and the touches and the impact he had were very often decisive, clinical actions in the game. And yeah, it's just, as I say, I still just can't believe we're talking about this and we're having to think about it, really. It's just been such a difficult week for everyone who's got any association or any link at all with Liverpool as a football club.
Yeah, I think the sort of cleverness as he was as a player that we've both touched on there in terms of those goals and being able to fit into a couple of different positions, being able to adapt to the teammates that he had around him as well at Liverpool and get the best out of other people. I think, it ties in with another of his passions was gaming. I think that sort of the level that he got to with his FIFA and that kind of thing, that again says to me that's somebody who studies the game. I know he was, planning ahead for what his future would be in terms of coaching. He was, doing his UEFA licenses and thinking about that. Even the fact that he was doing that, I think as long ago as 2 or 3 years ago, when he's sort of in the prime of his career, most players are not thinking along those lines and, all that kind of side of the game until, at least into their 30s and maybe even beyond that, maybe once they've retired. But, he was desperate to learn. He was desperate to kind of take that next step, his kind of personal development and that kind of determination to improve himself, I think was, a big part of him, which came across in a variety of ways, and obviously makes it even more difficult that he's not going to have the opportunity to experience those things in the future. But as you say, it's so tough to talk about him. A lot of people have made a lot of eloquent points. I think Liverpool have handled the situation this week as well as what they possibly could, and I think we should probably, sort of end on that, really. It's been a really tough time. I think Liverpool will continue to, be as supportive as what they can be. I know there's things in place for people who need it. We're going to obviously continue to talk about this situation, no matter what happens with Liverpool, no matter what the storyline is with Liverpool in the next however many months or however many years. There is always going to be a framing of this situation around it, which is obviously the last thing that anybody wanted or expected. But yeah, that was the last point I was going to make, really. I don't know if you wanted to come in on that as well, but it's been emotional. But I think Liverpool have handled it as well as they possibly could have done in the circumstances.
Yeah, I actually think you've worded it slightly better than I did earlier, that it will be the framework almost of how we think about Liverpool going forward now, and it will provide the backdrop to everything that happens now with this club and with this team. It will be, and it just puts it all into perspective, really. You and I will in weeks and months to come be writing about tactics and transfers and decisions on a slot mason. It just doesn't matter to say, and it all comes. And we know this anyway, and we know this in the grand scheme of things, but we get wrapped up in it, don't we? The passion of football and week in, week out. But it's another reminder, I suppose, really of what is important. And I think the sad point that as well is that, Diogo Jota was 28. He still had a lot to give in his career as well. And he himself admitted that last season was a frustrating season for him in many ways, mainly due to injuries as well. And, obviously it ended fantastically with the Premier League, with the Nations League as well. I got married in the summer, and he would have been, going to come back and really have an incredible season. And it just makes it even more tragic and unbelievable, really, that he's not going to get the opportunity to do that. So, yeah, I think, as you rightly said, Matt, really well, that it will provide the framework of everything going forward now in our coverage of Liverpool. And you and I know we'll keep going back to it. The rest of the guys at Liverpool.com will as well. And it's something that we'll keep in our kind of our hearts and our memories going forward.
Yeah, it's been a really tricky period. As you say, it's a reminder of what is important, but also I think football is important as well, and it's important that we talk about those things. I think the reaction, the fact that so many millions of people around the world have been shaken by this is because Diogo Jota was such a good footballer, and it is a sort of conflicting thing to say, really, in terms of what is important. We know what is important above all else, but what he did for Liverpool was important to a lot of people as well, and that's why the situation has been as big as what it's been. But yeah, I think we'll end it there for this week. It's obviously a difficult topic to talk about. It's obviously going to be difficult for Liverpool moving forwards without Diogo Jota, but as ever, Liverpool's number 20 won't be forgotten. Thank you, Michael, for joining me for this. Thank you to you guys at home as well for tuning in if you felt able to do so. We'll continue to report on this and plenty else on Liverpool.com over the next few weeks and months.